I still remember the sound of the rain that night. Heavy, cold, relentless. It was the kind of rain that makes the world feel smaller, like everything is closing in. Daniel had come home early from his business trip, suitcase still damp from the storm, eyes darker than I had ever seen them. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just held up my phone, open to the messages I thought I'd deleted forever. "Your boss," he said quietly. Just 2 words, but they shattered something I didn't even realize was breakable. I didn't try to deny it. Couldn't. The truth was there, written in my own words, dripping with the arrogance of a woman who believed she'd never be caught. That night, Daniel packed a single bag and left. No threat, no drama. Just a silence so absolute it followed me into every corner of the house for months. 8 years later, I still wake up some nights expecting to hear his footsteps in the hallway. I've built a life since then, or something that looks like one. I changed cities, changed jobs, and pretended to change myself. But some ghosts don't care about geography. When people talk about regret, they imagine it as a feeling that fades with time. For me, it grew sharper. I thought I missed Daniel's love, but what I really missed was the version of myself that existed before I broke him. He used to look at me like I was the calm after a storm. After the affair, I became the storm itself. 2 months ago, a friend from our old neighborhood sent me a photo. It was Daniel, older, broader, his hair touched with silver, standing beside a woman outside a bookstore. She was smiling at him in a way that made my chest tighten. There was peace in his face, the kind he never had with me toward the end. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the balcony, scrolling through memories like an addict. Old photos, old messages, pieces of a life I threw away for excitement that vanished within months. My affair wasn't about love. It was about validation. My boss, Greg, knew exactly what to say to a woman who felt invisible. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just reclaiming something. But I lost everything worth keeping. Daniel never remarried. At least that's what I thought until last week. I was at a conference in Chicago, standing near the hotel bar when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Calm, deep, unmistakable. I turned and there he was, Daniel, holding a drink, laughing with 2 colleagues. My first instinct was to run. Instead, I froze. The moment he saw me, the laughter drained from his face. "Laura," he said. My name sounded foreign in his mouth. We stood there, caught between what was and what would never be again. He looked older, yes, but stronger, too. I wanted to tell him everything I'd rehearsed in my mind over the years. The apologies, the explanations, the 1,000 ways I'd punished myself. But the words felt small compared to what I'd done. He didn't invite me to sit, but I did anyway. The silence between us was unbearable. I finally said, "You look good. So do you?" He replied, but his eyes said something else. Maybe pity, maybe indifference. He mentioned he'd moved back to Boston, that he ran his own small architecture firm now. When I asked if he was happy, he smiled, not proudly, but softly. "Yeah, I am." That was when she appeared, the same woman from the bookstore photo. She walked up, touched his shoulder, and asked if he was ready to go. He introduced her as Emily, his fiancée. I managed a polite smile, shaking her hand. My heart felt like glass grinding against itself. As they left, Daniel turned back once. "Take care, Laura," he said. I watched them disappear into the elevator, realizing that 8 years of guilt hadn't prepared me for that single moment. Seeing the man I destroyed finally free of me that night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, remembering the man who once loved me beyond reason, and the woman I became reckless, careless, blind. The next morning, I found myself standing outside the hotel cafe, clutching a cup of coffee I didn't even remember buying. My reflection in the glass looked composed, but inside I was trembling. 8 years of imagined apologies, 8 years of believing that maybe someday I could tell him I was sorry. And when the moment came, all I managed was, "You look good." I told myself to move on, to respect his peace, but something inside refused. That night, I wrote him an email, not to win him back, not to reopen old wounds, but because I couldn't carry the words any longer. "Daniel, I saw you today. You looked happy, truly happy. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just want to say that I know what I did to you was more than betrayal. It was cruelty wrapped in selfishness. I spent years blaming loneliness, stress, anything that made the truth easier to hold. But the truth is simple. I made you doubt your worth. I made love feel unsafe. I hope she gives you what I couldn't. I hope you never have to question her loyalty. Laura, I read it over a dozen times before pressing send. Then I turned off my phone, afraid of what silence might mean. Days passed, no reply. I tried to convince myself that was closure enough. But there's a strange ache that comes from being erased from someone's life so completely. It's like dying, but being forced to watch everyone else keep living. On the 5th day, his name appeared in my inbox. Laura, I don't hate you. I did for a long time, but hate eventually burns itself out. I'm not sure if forgiveness is the right word. Maybe understanding. We were both different people back then. I've learned that sometimes loving someone isn't enough when one of you is broken. I appreciate your message. Take care of yourself, Daniel. There were no sparks, no tears, no cinematic closure, just words that felt final. For the first time in years, I cried without trying to stop myself. I stayed in Chicago an extra day, walking aimlessly through the city. I thought about how easily we confuse passion with meaning and validation with love. Greg, the man I'd risked everything for, was now a name buried under a dozen HR reports and LinkedIn updates. He'd moved on within months. I was the only one who'd built a shrine to a mistake. As the day faded into evening, I sat by the river, watching the light ripple across the water. The air was cool, the city humming around me, indifferent to my memories. I thought about Daniel's calmness, about the peace in his eyes when he looked at Emily. For years, I imagined he must still be hurting, still haunted. But he wasn't. He had healed in the quiet spaces I had ruined. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not words, not contact, but letting someone else's happiness exist without needing to be part of it. When I got back to my apartment, I deleted his email. Not out of anger, but acceptance. Some stories aren't meant to be rewritten. They're meant to remind you who you shouldn't become again. Months later, I heard from a mutual friend that Daniel and Emily had gotten married in a small ceremony by the sea. I smiled when I heard it. A real smile this time. There was no bitterness left. Just the faint ache of knowing I'd once held that same peace in my hands and let it slip through my fingers. I started therapy after that. I stopped trying to erase the woman I was and started understanding why I became her. I learned that loneliness isn't cured by attention, that guilt doesn't have to define you, and that some people come into your life to show you the weight of what you're capable of losing. Sometimes late at night, I still think of him, the way he looked when he first found out, and the way he looked 8 years later, free. It's strange, but that memory doesn't hurt anymore. It reminds me that healing doesn't always come from being forgiven. Sometimes it comes from realizing you can't undo what's been done, only learn from it. If Daniel ever thinks of me, I hope it's not with anger. I hope he remembers that once before everything went wrong, we were good. And if he doesn't remember me at all, that's okay, too. Because after all this time, I finally understand. The greatest consequence of betrayal isn't losing the person you love. It's becoming someone you no longer recognize and then spending the rest of your life finding your way back. And in that quiet, steady return to myself, I think I finally